Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. This is Bart talking to you after the U.S. men have qualified to the finals of the 2023 Concacaf Nations League with 2 wins in the March window. Before we get really into this, I do want to remind you to please subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening, and don't forget to follow the show at Soccer for Us Pod. Like I said, we had 2 wins, and to talk about these 2 wins, I have 2 gentlemen who have lots of thoughts about Anthony Hudson, I am sure. First, let's bring on from at USMNT Quarter on Twitter. It's Caleb. Caleb, you had 2 wins, you had 8 total goals, and Anthony Hudson is undefeated as USM coach, right? Oh, wait, no, he lost to Serbia. Whatever, we're not counting it. He is undefeated in real competitions as USMNT coach.
I mean, he's doing the job. What else can you ask for a guy stepping in? It's a weird situation, and he's doing it. I think you gotta like what he's doing as far as roster selection. I think it was one of our biggest complaints in the Berhalter era. So there's a plus there. But I I've seen a few people talk about, is he the future? I don't know. We'll probably talk about that later. But you got to be happy so far.
Yeah, so far so good. And, another guy who is excited to talk about the fact that Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna are still actually friends, maybe possibly. It's U.S. keeper, also known as Thomas. Thomas, how did you make out the Gio and Christian relationship on the field this past window?
Yeah, and these guys are professionals. I mean, I think Christian said it, in an interview, was the whole situation was kind of ridiculous. I think from the players' perspective, these guys communicate a lot, between windows and during the week, and they follow one another. So I think there's a strong group here. They're going to overcome that, and it's clear that they're moving forward.
So I think that's a sign that we should all move forward as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, unless there's some other major thing to drop. I'm ready to move forward and continue forward with this cycle and just build this team to the best it can be.
Well, before we get too deep into the weeds of this window, let's talk about the big takeaways you had from the total window as a whole. Both matches, it's a 1-0 win over El Salvador. It's a 7-1 win over Grenada. Caleb, what was your big takeaway from the March 2023 Nations League window, these 2 massively important games?
I mean, moving on, right? I think there's a lot of things we got to move on from. Drama, coaching, things that we hated, we liked. I mean, it's just, there's a turning of a page. I think this is just the first step to it. Unfortunately, it's not, a full moving on, because we're still stuck in limbo with all these hiring decisions that have to be made. So I wish, we could tie some bows on these things, but I think it's also different because we're in a window where we don't have to qualify. So if we are going to drag our feet, I guess this is the time to do it. If we end up, let me put it this way: if we end up with the coach that everybody wants and like some magical, signing, we'll all be happy. No problems. We'll all be super happy with the time. If if the federation drags their feet and, it's, I'll say Jesse Marsh, just because I know there's so many people on Twitter that would be so upset with that. Even though it might not be the worst situation, but then I think Twitter's gonna have a meltdown. So it's just one of those things. Until it happens, it's really hard to say.
Well, I mean, look, I think what we have to focus on is the players that were there, because they're probably going to be there no matter who the coach is. To me, that was my biggest takeaway is we had a lot of depth, specifically at the winger position. It looked like we had guys who were able to come on as subs, who were able to start as kind of second choice options. And though we weren't necessarily dominant, we were still very competent. Thomas, I feel like depth was, for me, again, my big takeaway. I feel like that's hopeful as we look toward the future.
Yeah, I like the depth that we're seeing overall. I mean, before you weren't sure what can Booth do. Can Luca De La Torre, can he play six? And I think they had the opportunity to experiment there. Now, mind you, the opponent was the opponent, and you had to take that for what it is. But to be able to conduct that experiment in these critical games, because that's what they were, I think is important. And I liked what we saw there. I'm excited to see that depth build. With Zendejas. I mean, you're phasing out. These players are going to phase out the other players, and I think that's important in a cycle. I think it's important early in the cycle because too often we see these players get held on till mid-cycle and then they're done. I mean, and we have a younger group in general, but the core of it is good. It's a strong group. And I think in that interim until a new sporting director and a manager has, I think we've got a good group that's going to be strong.
Well, and look, we saw the January window where you brought in a mostly domestic-based team with even some of the old guys who were not domestic being like not even really starting or playing for their teams. It was a very young group. This was a very experienced, mostly European-based team. We had one MLS guy, Miles Robinson. We had two guys from Liga MX and Senora and Zendejas, as you mentioned. So I think it just shows not just the depth, but also the breadth of our coaching. I guess our coach's ability to like look across the world and find talent, if that makes any sense. We're not just going to MLS or just going to some European leagues. Certainly not just the top four. So we're able to look and find talent in a lot of places, and that's really positive. I mean, obviously the biggest positive was the fact that we got 2 wins. The first one was a 7-1 win over Grenada. Thomas, it's not like you said, not the toughest competition, but it was a 7-1 win. That's fun, right?
It's very fun, and again, I mean, that's a game you win. You know what I mean? For the talent the U.S. has, no matter who's coaching the team, you've got the talent. You got to put the result on the board. And they made their mark. You know what I mean? Because we've seen in the past where a team, is U.S. team is dominant over another team, but maybe they don't play well on the road. To do that, on a surface that wasn't great, on the road was good to see, to kind of kick everything off. We're starting fresh with a new cycle. In games that matter, because they do matter for a number of things. For us to get into the semifinal round, as well as position ourselves to qualify for Copa America. So they do matter, and I think that's kind of the cherry on top with this cycle. With this tournament is there's more at stake.
We had a pretty solid lineup, but still a rotated lineup. Matt Turner in goal, Brian Reynolds, Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, Joe Scally across the back. So definitely, I would say, second choice options at all of 4 of those positions. Midfield was McKinney, Luca De La Torre, and Gio Reyna in the midfield. Brendan Aronson, Christian Pulisic, and Ricardo Pepi up top. Now, Caleb, I said the 4 guys in the back were kind of second choice options, but the rest of the team was, I mean, maybe Luca, but I mean, the rest of the team seemed pretty much a first choice lineup.
That was kind of weird, if you're gonna do a second choice lineup, do a second choice lineup, right? You're right. It was kind of a half and half thing there, and you wonder kind of what was the thought process there. Maybe he's thinking if we're going to be on the ball, defense doesn't necessarily have to be as strong, which, I mean, we've already pointed out the depth. It's like we're not talking about second choice is weak. I mean, these are still
second choice. It's not the
very
preferred.
talented players. Exactly. So maybe that's his thought, still wanting to go forward. A lot of quality, a lot of talent in attack, and then get the guys some time that maybe wouldn't feature later on. I really don't know. Really like what I see from Joe Scally. He seems just very solid. I would never describe him as flashy, but I'm never worried about, what's he going to do when he gets the ball. I always feel pretty good about his decision making. So I think there's a lot to like there. But the attacking talent, Gio Reyna in the midfield. I mean, I think we saw a lot of what we wanted to see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
so
like Hudson was on Twitter. What we did what we wanted.
I mean, seriously though, we saw basically what was a double pivot. I mean, the midfield trio of McKinney, De La Torre, and Reyna was never going to be something about defensive hardiness, Thomas, but it was a little bit different. It got the job done, and I feel like it's a good trial for this type of formation against teams that may not be that good. I mean, I know we're not going to have to go through the slog of CONCACAF qualifying, but it's just something to try at this point, right?
Yeah, the formation, it was nice to see a different formation out there, and I think they learned some from what they made, because I think it was pretty much obvious that Reyna was not coming back on defense. In that central piece, he was staying more on the offensive side, so that leaves a little vulnerability in the midfield. So but I like it though, because you have to have different formations, you have to have different styles of play to suit your opponent, to suit the players they have on the field. And I don't think we saw a lot of that last cycle, bits and pieces of it. So to start the cycle with that is good, because again, Hudson has pretty much the same coaching staff around them. So there's not a lot of difference, I think, in terms of that functionality of what they know they can do. So try it out. That's what this is for. Try it out.
Yeah, and I think just from a formation standpoint, it looked fluid. Players weren't necessarily stuck in their positions on the field. They were able to rotate. I mean, we saw both Pulisic and Aronson come inside. Aronson and Gio kind of flip-flopped on occasion on the wing. Um, you know, to me, that was a positive that they didn't feel rigid. Caleb, I think that was probably one of the biggest criticisms that we had throughout qualifying and really throughout Berhalter's tenure was that things just felt so rigid and so defined, and there wasn't a lot of room for creativity or room for freedom. And I'm not saying that Hudson, this is like a massive shift, because I don't know if he is giving them the strict instructions, but it does seem a little different.
I think a lot of times under Berhalter, you could say things looked almost scripted, right? Like he was like, this is what we want to do. This is what we're going to do no matter what, regardless of what the defense is going to do, what looks they're giving you. Like there was no change up. And I think a lot of the times the players looked stiff and not necessarily thoughtless, but if what Berhalter wanted wasn't presented, then it was just a lot of fruitless uh, runs in the attacking third, crosses to nobody. It just looked very disjointed sometimes, unless the opponent played into our hands. Right? And I think you nailed it. It looked a bit more fluid, a bit more free. Um, is that a good thing? I mean, there's a lot of talent on the team. We saw a lot of guys creating, dribbling, getting fouled. You know, I tweeted this out. We've got a lot of guys that are really good off the dribble. We're gonna get a lot of fouls. But if we get all those fouls and we get all those set pieces and we can't do anything with them, then it's pointless.
Yeah.
And right now, we don't look very dangerous in those moments. Um, it's something that's I'd love to see improved.
I mean, look, it's Grenada. So to your point, yes, we looked free. We looked positionally fluid. We looked competent because it's Grenada. They weren't very good. But Thomas, it looked enjoyable to watch, right? It was not the anxious slog that we've kind of seen, the oh my gosh, I hope we can break this team down. Now, granted, again, we beat them 5-0 at home, but it did seem like it took forever to get that first goal. What did you see differently in this match compared to, last June when we played them in Nations League?
I mean, they seem looser as a team. I think they. They're focused. I think they're ready to go out there. They had no, reservations or hesitations on anything. I think they had that in mind. And I think they want to and I think part of it, they had a little chip on their shoulder from everything that had gone on over the last few months. And I think that's really a testament to the team to kind of say, look, we're gonna come out, we're gonna show them, what we can do, and get out on the scoreboard early, which is great to see them do that and kind of just take the ease and the stress off that. And on the road's tough, and that's an odd stadium too. Like I on a side note, that's a very odd stadium from a fan's perspective.
Yeah.
With a track around it, but the fans are so far away, and I mean, it's just an odd.
You had the net from like the shot put like literally 2 feet from the end line. Yeah.
Yeah. That was so weird. I don't know how some fans could even see any of the action, really. But
I know. Well, listen, you mentioned getting off to a good start. Ricardo Pepi had home a goal in the 4th minute. Aronson and McKinney make it 3-0 by the 31st minute. Yes, we gave up a goal in the 32nd minute. I am curious to get you guys' feelings on that. So by minute 32, though, we're still up 3-1. We respond almost immediately, get a 4th. It's 4-1 at halftime. Come out of the second half, we get a goal from Pulisic, who finishes the night with 2 assists and a goal. Pepi scores a second in the 53rd, and then in the 72nd minute, Zendejas finishes off with his goal, and again 7-1 is the final. Thomas, was that goal for Grenada them being very good, us being a little too comfortable? What do you think it was?
Well, Grenada, I mean, they held their own early on in that match, and we saw that back in June. So they have some talent there, but I think the U.S. just lost their focus in that moment, because it was a pretty direct attack on that, and they scored a minute or two right after U.S. scored on that. And I mean, U.S. responded right back after that with McKinney's goal, I believe it was, in the 34th minute. So I think there was just a little lag. I just think they lost focus on that. It's 3-0. Okay, we're good to go. And I think they got caught, gazing, reliving the goal there. So, but they regrouped, which was good to see.
Caleb, what do you make of Grenada's goal?
Kind of the same. Thomas pointed out, it was kind of quickly after our goal. I think it was just a little bit of a letdown. I mean, I don't want to take any credit away from Grenada there. It was a well-worked goal. I mean, it really was.
Yeah, it was.
And I think it was our guys probably underestimating him a little bit, let down from the goal, and then a little bit of their quality mixed in. So it's one of those. It's soccer. It happens. The overall scoreline of the game tells the story.
Yeah, 100%. It was a very controlled game from the U.S. One moment that they all let off kind of led to the goal. Right. To me, the positive was you get Luca De La Torre on for about 75 minutes. That was good. Get him into the game, get him more accustomed to playing at the U.S. national team level, because he has been good in La Liga. You got Zendejas back in after what I think was a pretty good showing early in that January camp. Taylor Booth gets a run out. That's fantastic. Johnny Cardozo gets 15 minutes. I don't know if I wish we'll talk about this when we get there, but I wish he maybe could have started this game, just because I think it would have been a good opportunity for him to get his bearings in a very low stakes but still competitive game. But look, I think everyone who played, you can take positives from it. I don't think anyone played poorly, and I think for a game like this, Thomas, that is your over. Like, the 7-1 scoreline is great, but the fact that everyone seemed to have a pretty good experience out there and a good performance is probably the best takeaway.
It is. You balance the lineup. You've got some, you're not your number one choices out there who perform well. You're creating that chemistry. You're creating that continuity with the team. I think we have to do that early. We've got to experiment now. And they felt good about themselves because they all contributed, in their own way to be able to do that. You're right. I do agree. I wish I would have seen Johnny play a little bit more. I don't think he got I mean, he didn't get I always say a fair shake. It is what it is. But I just like to see a little bit more of, a little bit more opportunity for players to get in there and perform, in these opportunities. But they'll have other chances. for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've got an entire Gold Cup tournament to come up this summer. So we get the 7-1 win down in Grenada. We come back home to a hot and steamy night, it seemed like, down in Orlando, Florida, to take on El Salvador. We ended up winning 1-0. We got a goal from Ricardo Pepi, who had scored in both of these. He did not start, though, however. Starting lineup was Matt Turner in goal. The back line was, I think this would have been the first choice back line had you asked Anthony Hudson. Serginho Dest on the right, Miles Robinson, Tim Ream in the center, and Anthony Robinson on the left. Midfield trio was McKinney, Musa, and again, you had Gio Reyna in that midfield. Zendejas, Pulisic, and DK across the top. Caleb, this lineup, I think, is safe to say this was probably as close to first choice. I don't know if there's a big difference between Zendejas or Aronson right now, but that back line seems like of the guys he had available, those were the guys he wanted to put out there. And really, I mean, El Salvador is a very good team. They always give us trouble. This seemed like the lineup that Hudson said, yeah, these are the guys to get it done.
Yeah, I think so. I think you look at across Twitter, I think most people would probably say Raymond Richards at the moment, but that back four of A-Rob, Tim Ream right now, because he's playing out of his mind, with Dest on the right, that's it. And then with Richards not being here, Miles goes in. I think, we'll talk about Miles. I think he's phenomenal. That back line is extremely strong. We'll get into a little bit some weaknesses later on. We'll talk about A-Rob a bit, but you got to like it. And then moving forward, again, just strength, shows the depth we had. Zendejas and Aronson, you said, it's kind of a wash there. I would maybe give the nod to Aronson just because of who he plays week in, week out. But I mean, you gotta like what Zendejas gives you. He's real creative. I like him. He's got some spunk. He's got a sweet left foot. So it was a really good light. It was a really good lineup to see coming out against El Salvador. There's definitely no pushover.
It's also important to note, as you talked about Zendejas and Aronson, they're both not the first choice. They're not like Tim Weah, I think, is still the first choice. So really, that depth that we have there is really good. That was impressive. The subs in the 60th minute, Aronson and Pepi came on. 71st minute, Luca De La Torre came on, and Booth came on. He got 2 sub appearances. We'll talk about him as well at the end. Johnny Cardozo coming on in stoppage time, pretty insubstantially. But let's talk about Daryl DK for a second. Thomas, DK got the start back home in Orlando, where he had great success for the Orlando City club down there. Granted, they're a terrible club, and I have zero positive things to say about them. But he played 60 minutes. Pepi comes on, and like a minute later, literally, he scores a goal. What do you think was working or not working for DK?
I mean, I think DK he's a different type of striker. I think Pepi is more fluid in the box. I think he's just, he's more skilled that way. DK still, he's still pretty young in terms of his soccer experience. So I think we're seeing him develop and do well, but I'm not sure necessarily the opponent, the lineup, I don't know what fits his style of play best. 2 strikers up top, whatever that is. And so I just don't think he could get his groove. I mean, he's off to the races. I think he scores a certain type of goal that the El Salvador defense wasn't really going to be looking to allow. There's just I want to see more of him. But you've got to kind of, sometimes you have to fit your formations on a combination of the players available along with the opponent you're playing. And I just don't think either one really suited his skill set for El Salvador.
Yeah, Caleb, I mean, I don't want to say DK was bad. I think that's, to Thomas's point, that's unfair to say he was bad, but we've seen more not good performances by DK for the US than we've seen good performances. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, look, he's not a bad player, but I don't think anyone is looking at Daryl DK as the heir apparent to the striker position for the U.S. men's national team. I don't think anybody's looking at him as a number 1 or 2 option. He's a depth piece, and that's okay. I mean, the guy, he can score goals, he can play a role, um, but if he doesn't have the best game, I don't think it's the end of the world. I know there's a lot of people out there that really, really are rooting for the guy, and I am too. I hope he has wonderful success, but I think um, we've got one who we saw, Pepe. We got one who's, everything's pointing to the fact that he might be committing to us, full on Balogun. Um, those are the guys we're probably looking at. So if DK, if he has a great game, great. If he doesn't, I'm not I'm not super upset about it, if that makes sense. But I think to Thomas's point, he's not he's scoring goals. I think Thomas put it a really good way. He scores the type of goals that El Salvador's not going to allow. I thought it was really, really well put. Um, so it is what it is, but you saw an immediate impact. And I think the movement in the box from Pepe's a bit different as well. It's just one of those things. And I'm
Look,
okay with it. Like I said, I'm okay with it.
I think Ricardo Pepe's the only striker I trust to score us a goal in a game.
Oh yeah,
He's the only one who's really
right.
done it, you know, and that goes a long way. But let's go back to that. You mentioned him. The Flo Balogun discussion is he was in Orlando the week leading up to the game. He didn't attend the game. He actually flew back home that day. It's been reported he will commit to the U.S. Does he immediately become our number 1? Is the first question. But also, where does that leave Pepe and Sargent when it comes to the guys who have been the most good for the team, right? They've put in the most good performances for the U.S. In their time. How does that shake things up?
I don't know if he becomes the number 1 immediately. I think that would be irresponsible just because of his profile. Here you come, you're the number 1. I think he's got to earn it. Um, we see we see it all the time, and it's not just the U.S. We see it in international soccer. Guys will light it up for club, and then they're nowhere to be seen when it comes to country. And then there's some that are vice versa. I think he's got to come in and he's got to earn it. I mean, the good thing is when you're talking about striker depth for a while there, it was looking bleak, and you throw his name in the hat, and you just got to feel so much better about that number 9 spot. Balogun, Pepe, Sargent, Wea can play the 9. I mean, we're moving on up. If he commits like we all think we do, we're moving on up, baby.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas, let's not kid ourselves. It would be a massive get. He probably becomes the most talented striker we have in the pool. But, I think Pepe did a lot of good for himself this window.
He did. I mean, look, Pepe, he's shown flashes. We're seeing more consistency at a higher level for him. So I think that's important. And when you look at your strikers, traditionally, not just the U.S., but traditionally, you kind of go with a hot hand, right? So Pepe's been playing well. You stick, you give him those opportunities. DK's been playing well. You call him in. You could have called in Sargent, in my opinion, but you look at that, and so I think that's where it's going to kind of fall a little bit. You're not going to just give it to Balquin. I mean, you got to say, look, you're going to earn it like everyone else is, because right now it's open, and it's open for anyone. There's no like this is the guy and you're waiting, because if you think back over history, I think Josie comes to mind as one of the more consistent strikers the U.S. used for over and over, even when he wasn't playing well, and so. We don't have that right now. And one, because the pool is so young. I mean, when you look at the strikers, they're so young. You cannot just say this is the guy. And I think you got to grow with the program, and it's great for competition for these guys. It's got to give them fire. They want to start. They want to play for the national team. Pepe had that fire. He didn't make the team for the World Cup, and now he's coming back, and he's proven himself.
Yeah, Caleb. I mean, I think we agree that starting Flo immediately makes no sense, but it seemed like you agreed a lot with what Thomas was saying there. Shaking your head. You can't see it obviously on the podcast, but shaking your head. What exactly? How are you feeling about it?
I think Thomas nailed it. He's talking about the youth. We are so young. There's so much talent, but he's absolutely right. No one has staked their claim. No one's said, "This is my spot. I'm king of the hill, and you're not taking it." It is still open. So I think, yeah, he steps in with a lot of hype. He's extremely talented. What he's doing in League On is not anything to be, there's nothing to shake a stick at. He's doing something that is serious. Um,
Wait a second.
that said,
He hasn't had a chance to prove it in the Premier League. So how can we be sure
you
that
know
he's
what?
actually good at soccer?
You're right. You're right. I forgot about that. Southgate, he made a great point. He made a great point there. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
Kylian Mbappe. Not very good. He's only proved it in Ligue 1.
yeah, exactly, exactly. He's got it. He needs to get
He's
tested.
right.
He needs to get
Leo
tested.
Messi never played in the Premier League. I don't know if we can call him the greatest.
Unbelievable the way they feel about themselves, right?
They're like pro Rel stands. They think that they're absolutely the only way to do anything.
It is.
I've just angered everyone on that. Look, I think I'm gonna not to speak for everyone, but look, let's put it this way. I think we want Flo. I don't think Flo is our starter for June 15 when we're playing in the Nations League semifinal for a number of reasons. One, it's a little irresponsible. Two, the likelihood he actually does that is very low. Like that's a competitive match that would cap tie him. I think at that point, like that's probably not happening. So, do we feel confident in Ricardo Pepi on a scale of Zaxby's, you know, honey mustard to their insane sauce? Caleb, how confident are you in Ricardo Pepi right now?
I mean, you got to be pretty singing confident. I don't know what. I'm not the most frequent Zaxby's guy. I like it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty basic, right? Tongue torch is what I go to. What
Tongue
is
torch is
what's
that's a good feeling to have.
what's higher than tongue torch, but lower than insane? Because he's right there. I mean,
Yeah,
he's scoring goals. He's extremely confident. The dude has a chip on his
yeah,
shoulder, and that is a good thing. I don't like the circumstances. I really don't hate it for him, but if it drives him to be the best that he can be, his ceiling is high.
yeah.
The guy can score goals, man. Yeah, it's just he's one of those guys. He's got a nose for the goal. The chip that he scored versus El Salvador was beautiful.
Such a good goal.
Turns and runs. He's being pulled down. He shoulders. He rides the tackle. It's not a tackle. He rides the foul. The guy's trying to pull him down, and he chips the keeper. Some guys can't even do that untouched. Like, do y'all realize, like, 1v1 with a keeper, and people will try to chip a keeper, and they cannot do it to the level that Pepe did it while being ridden the entire way, shoulder to shoulder, arm being tugged, off balance. I mean, it's incredible. You've got to like what you see. If Flo does not commit, I feel great having Pepe, and that's why I put it on Twitter the other day. It's not a Flo versus Pepe thing. If we have both, that is a fantastic thing for our program.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely would be. Obviously, you want as much talent as possible, but to have two guys who you can probably feel very confident in is good. Thomas, what's your confidence level on Pepe? I mean, are you feeling good if he's starting our Nations League final? Say we get
I
there.
yeah, I am. I'm feeling good. I mean, because we focused on the goal, which was amazing, but he had two or three other opportunities that
Yes.
like the keeper made saves. You know what I mean? He could have gone a couple different ways with it. He really, he impressed in his substitution stint in there. I was very very happy to see that. He's so composed around the goal. He's not fidgety. He's not nervous, and that's when you get strikers or in any score around the goal. We all know that composure is huge in
Mm-hmm.
those moments, and he showed that in a very close game, and in a just coming off the bench. That's kind of needing a goal and probably needing a couple really in his mind or in the team's mind. So that's impressive. I'm hoping he keeps form and he's definitely he'd be tops on my list to start.
Well, I think we all agree Pepe had a very good window. Thomas, who else do you feel like, which player had a very, like, a good window that set themselves apart or just even solidified something?
I mean, I like, there's some players. I think Scally did great in the first game. I liked what we saw from Mark McKenzie. I thought he looked good in that game. I mean, I'll let Caleb speak to it, but I'll just mention, I mean, Miles Robinson in the second game. I he was awesome. Like, I mean, so for me, those are kind of the standouts in terms of just individual, kind of one-off match pieces there. I think Scally, for me, he played a different game than he plays with his club a little bit, and that was nice to see him have that utility on that. So I think, and honestly, I wasn't happy with with Destin and Anthony Robinson as much. So I think that's bodes well for him, I think, because they both seem just a little rusty, bad touches and just bad decision making at times. You can get away with that versus Concacaf teams, but when you go against the elite, you need to be your best and have your best.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to say that Scally looked good in comparison. That's for sure. I'll say Gio Reyna. I thought he actually I don't think his performances were fantastic. I think just getting him back out on the field, getting him in a position that allowed him to be a little bit more creative, be able to kind of drive the offense, if you will. I think that is good. And it's just, look, we talked about it at the beginning, but it does seem like the team has moved past that World Cup drama. And I don't mean the coach and parent interaction. I mean, Gio's kind of attitude that he had at the World Cup. I think they're all past it, so we can be all past it. It's a part of his story, but it's not who he is necessarily. So I feel very confident about Gio coming out of this window. Thomas, I know you probably have some other people to talk about, but not Thomas, sorry, Caleb. I know you have other people to talk about, but Caleb, I'm going to let you just speak the truth about Miles Robinson.
People don't want to hear it, man. They don't want to hear it. Thomas, listen, I got to correct you. He didn't have a good game. It was actually your imagination, because what I've been told, because he plays in MLS, he can't be good, right? That's what I've been told. That's what I understand. I'm trying to work through it. We got some investigations going on. No, I mean, listen, Miles Robinson was the number one guy at right center back. Well, actually, I think everybody had Richards and Miles paired. Then both of them getting hurt just ruined everything. All our hopes and dreams were crashed and just burned. But he was balling before the injury, and then I guess because recency bias, people forgot that he could play, and it just became all this talk about how he's just moving down the center back depth chart just because he plays in MLS. I mean, I don't understand it. We've seen him against Canada. They've got some guys that can play soccer. I don't know if you guys know that. Alfonso Davies, Jonathan David, like those dudes can play. Mexico, all their talent, and he plays well, shuts them down, plays well with his feet. Everybody wants to say he can't play with his feet. No one is saying that he's, a John Brooks level player with his feet. That's okay. He doesn't have to be. He puts
I'm
out
with
so
you.
many
I don't
fires.
understand where this narrative that he's bad.
Dude.
Like he is we watch him weekly for Atlanta United, and I get it, the MLS competition, whatever. But like he is very competent with the ball at his feet and does frequently pick out not only long diagonals but dribble the ball upfield. So I'm like, I don't understand where this. I'm not saying he is Tim Ream or John Brooks. It's not, but like he's a above average center back when it comes to playing with his feet.
He's comfortable. He's comfortable when the ball comes to him. He doesn't panic. He can hit a ball. No, we don't. He's not going to be the guy who's going to sit there and just pull strings from the back, and that's okay. He doesn't need to be. I mean, the guy can play. He could probably go move to the Prem right now and step in as a starting center back for a good probably half the teams in the Prem. It's just the way it is. We hear Tata Martino talk about the fact that you look, Almiron is playing extremely well in the Premier League. And Tata said he struggled to beat Miles day in and day out.
Yeah.
The guy can play. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he had an incredible window, even though it was just that one game, because he started to show. He didn't start to show. He showed the people who started to discount him that they're speaking too soon and they need to hold their horses. I think a lot of people are going back and trying to delete some tweets right now. He's going to make a move. He's not signed his contract with Atlanta. He will play in Europe. He can play in Europe. That's what people don't understand. Just because you're playing in MLS doesn't mean you can't play in Europe. You just didn't have the opportunity and things have gone wrong.
Mhm.
It is what it is. Get off his back. That's my boy.
I appreciate it because I do. I mean, Miles was, I'm sorry, he was fantastic
It was great.
against El Salvador and really saved us on a couple of recoveries. He cleans up messes for other people. You know, I think it's fair to say that he is in the top 3 choices of center backs. I think that is fair to say. But my argument to people who say, oh, well, Chris Richards, and I go, well, Chris Richards isn't even really playing in the Premier League. He hasn't been able to find. Now, he's been hurt a lot, so there's that reason. But you can't tell me that he's better just because he's on a Premier League team, especially not for the U.S. men's national team. I think that, again, there's a group of center backs. There's 4 of them that I think I will call in for June, and I feel very confident. And Miles is one of those. I would trust him to start no matter what. I really would. But we'll stop talking about Miles for just a second. This is a U.S. soccer podcast, not an LA United podcast. Thomas, anyone that you felt didn't have a great window?
I mean, Pulisic's second match wasn't great. Musa, he did okay. But I think I mentioned earlier, Dest and Anthony Robinson really, I just didn't think they just seem rusty. I mean, Dest is not playing a lot, so that's surprising. A little surprising by Robinson, but Robinson's touches are inconsistent. We've seen that, with the national team quite a bit. So I think, I think I was a little disappointed in that. I was, they both offer a lot pushing forward, and you just want to make sure your players are at their best when they're in those spots. I mean, it gets covered up in general, but I think those 2 there were just kind of a little disappointing, for me. I think we could have maybe had a few more opportunities to score if if they had been able to maintain possession or made a better cross or pass.
Yeah, I definitely think both of our 2 quote starting outside backs, fullbacks weren't very good. Caleb, anyone else that you want to mention that maybe didn't have a great window?
No, I mean, I don't think anybody had a terrible window or necessarily stock down all the way. Just Anthony Robinson, just like he dribbled out of bounds or made a touch out of bounds, which it looked like a high schooler making that mistake. And I tweeted, I literally immediately tweeted, Caleb Wiley starting left back 2026. I mean, it's just frustrating, but again, like Thomas just said, we expect that. We know there's going to be some bad touches. What he brings is the fact that I think he can run for 475 minutes straight and never stop. And he gets up and down, never stops. Defensively, he's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
That's what he's bringing. If we're looking for him to sit there and combine 1-2s down the left, we're expecting something wrong, and that's on us. So that's why I say no one's necessarily stock down, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, let's end on the positive note of the fact that we have qualified for the Nations League finals. We're obviously the reigning champions of this tournament that Concacaf made up a couple years ago that we're still not quite sure what its importance is. That final tournament will be a semifinal and final in Las Vegas, Nevada on June 15th. The semifinal, the U.S. will play Mexico at 10 p.m. And then the final is 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, June 18th. A clash with Mexico, who, by the way, we're playing on April 19th in a month, less than a month, in some, again, a made-up Continental Classico thing that U.S. Soccer and Allstate decided to put together. So we're going to play Mexico at least twice this year, if not more, if we see them in the Gold Cup. But look, we're into we advanced, right? That's the thing that matters. Thomas, also, this means that we are now part of that group of teams that qualify automatically to the quarterfinals of next Nations League, which will be used to determine who goes to the Copa America next summer. So, like, those are the positives, right? I mean, we won 8, we scored 8 goals, we gave up 1. We're on to the semifinal. Like, I know it doesn't sound like much, but those are good things, right?
Oh, they are. And I actually think that point, is not really getting articulated of the next Nations League, because the Copa America is so important. Like we're not in that until we qualify. So that being that and getting to that next step where you don't have to play, you can have the opportunity to play a couple of good, hopefully European clubs. I had tweeted out earlier in the week about possible teams are going to play. I think Germany is one that we might see on U.S. soil here in one of those windows because they get a bye from UEFA qualifying. But that's important because we have to get that better quality opponent just in general. We have to take those opportunities when we can get them, and so that now allows the September and October windows to play against non-CONCACAF teams. In preparation for that, and then gets us a step closer to Copa America, which is a must. We have to make that tournament. It's being played in the U.S. It's in a year that we're hosting the World Cup, so it's important, and I think that's the nice thing about the way this has been structured here recently.
Caleb, last thoughts on this is a good thing, right? These are good things. So any final positive takeaways you have from this window?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's always a good thing. Anytime you're playing games that mean something, it's always better, right? Friendlies are good to see some guys, but if a game has no meaning, effort changes, varies amongst players, and so I always think it's a great thing when you're playing meaningful matches. So that's a great thing. I think guys getting back in again, turning the page, regardless of whether the federation has turned the page, they're dragging their feet on it. But I think you made a great point. At least the guys got in. These are the guys moving forward, regardless of the coaches. That's a good thing. And I do agree with you. They're clearly past it. We need to move past it as well. Like I'm so over articles coming out about Gio and Claudio Rand. Like, who cares? I'm over it. Let's go. Let's move. So this is the first step in that direction. So
absolutely. Look, the team is literally moving on to the Nations League finals. Again, those are on June 15th and 18th in Las Vegas, Nevada. It is wonderful to have the chance to actually defend your crown. Hopefully we do that. This is what we play for, to play actually good teams in CONCACAF. We're going to get at least 2. So that's a positive as well. You can follow Thomas on Twitter at USKeeper. You can follow Caleb on Twitter at USMNT Corner. You can follow me on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this episode. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.